Okay, I'm getting ready to weld up the rear kick-up for my Model T, the T-bucket frame. So I have the lower frame rails cut. Those are each 88 inches long to the short part of the angled cut. And then I have a kick-up here. That's going to give me a 6-inch kick-up to the top. So what I did is I took the other frame rail and I have that attached, clamped to the top rail, and then I took a measurement, checked to make sure that I had a good reading there, so I'm just a hair under 6 inches. And then I come down here to the other end and check again, and I've got that same reading. So I know now that that upper kick out is parallel to my lower rail. I've got everything clamped down to a nice flat piece of 1-inch steel. I went ahead and cut the 45s on the end of my tubes here, and I'll go ahead and get this tacked up. Once I'm happy with this rail, then I will go ahead and build the other rail right on top of this one. And that way they'll both be exactly the same, and I can make sure they're both nice and flat and a mirror of each other. So I went ahead and put on a series of tack welds, and right now I have it tack welded center, top, bottom corner, and then also down at the bottom. This one here is center, and I was able to get 2 there and 2 down here. And then once I finished that, I went ahead and I remeasured. So I measured across here, and I'm still 6 inches there. I came down and I measured here at the end, and I'm still 6 inches there. So with those tack welds, I didn't get any distortion. So what I'm going to do now is unclamp it, flip it over. I'll reclamp everything with the other side flipped up, and I'll go ahead and put tack welds on that side and do the same thing with the measuring. All right, so what I've done here now is I went ahead and welded the top and the bottom here and here, and then I went and did the full length on both sides in the back. Then I went ahead and welded across what'll be the sides of the frame. This is the outside part of the frame, so I have the seam side to the inside. And after welding my cross pieces here, both top and bottom, both sides, then I went ahead and I've got a weld here sticking up, so I put a 1/4-inch spacer in here. I reattached my other side rail, and I went ahead and measured, and so I was at 6 1/4 back here, and I was at 6 1/4 down on the other end. So that tells me that through the welding that I had done through this part on top and bottom, that I stayed parallel with this plane and this plane. So then I went ahead and welded these sides. Now what I'll do is I'll let this cool completely. I'll come back and I'll grind these welds flat, and that way I can flip it back over on the plate, and I have the long weld on each of these other 2 pieces on the inside of the frame to do. So I want to be able to have this be flat again, so that when I flip it back over on my plate, I can reclamp it down. I'll go ahead and weld it, and then once it's completely cooled, I'll grind that side, and then this rail will be done, and then I can go ahead and put my other pieces on top of this, and I'll be able to make the other one match exactly to this one. Hopefully once I unclamp everything, it'll still lay nice and flat. I'm suspecting that it's going to do that. I think the way I had the tacks done the first time through, if anything was going to move, it would have moved then. Just a little bit about the tubing that I'm using. So this is 2-inch by 3-inch tubing. I cut it on my Harbor Freight chop saw. I'm not using a Harbor Freight blade in there. I get the cutting blade at a local farm supply place, and those seem to work really nice. I did put a brand new blade in I rechecked everything to make sure that all of my straight cuts were square. I went ahead and made all the straight cuts that I needed to make. And then this one has the adjustable back fence. So I was able to set that to 30 degrees. And then I did all of my angle cuts. The most difficult part of the whole thing was just making sure to lay out the angle cuts so that the seam of the tubing stays to the inside. So these two pieces here build the kick up for the other part of the frame. And you can see I don't have the seams lined up top to bottom. However, when I go ahead and put this together, the seam on the other side will be to the inside of the frame. And that'll give me a nice finish on the outside of the frame. Nobody will see that seam once everything is painted up. I'm thinking everybody knows what I'm talking about when I'm talking about chamfering these edges before welding, but it's this edge here and here. And I just use the angle grinder, and what I want to do is I want to cut about a 45-degree angle and maybe about halfway through the thickness of the metal. So this is 2 inch by 3 inch. It's almost 1/8 inch wall. So I want to go down about a 1/16 of an inch. All right, I'm still working on the frame here. I've got the new rail clamped into place. So what I did is I set the long main rail into place, and then I made sure that I was even down on this end. So at this point, it's really important to make sure that this frame, each rail is exactly the same. So I went ahead, lined that up, and then I just took a machinist square here, and I went through and made sure that the rails were both in the same spot. I checked that in several areas down along the way as I clamped it into place. And then I clamped the riser piece in place for the frame here to get the kick up. And I made sure that that was square with the one below it. And then I went ahead and put the tail piece in. And as I put the tail piece in, I was off by about a 1/16 of an inch down on the end. So I went ahead and made a mark here, and I ground that just on my big disc grinder, just a 14-inch disc. And again, that's another Harbor Freight tool. I do have quite a few Harbor Freight tools, and the stuff that I have, like that grinder, I use quite often, and I'm very happy with that tool. So what I did is a little bit of grinding on this piece, got it lined up so that I had a nice fit here, and I was exactly flush here. And then I went ahead and clamped that piece into place. And same thing, I checked here to make sure that I was square, and again did that in a couple places here to make sure everything was squared up. Clamped it in, and then I've gone ahead and put the tack welds on, and I just have the outer and the inner and outer here, and then a tack weld in the middle. So what I'll do is go ahead and grind this weld and this weld, make sure that these are below my edge, and then I'll go ahead and flip this over so I can tack weld the other side. It's really important now to take that welding slow and make sure that this top frame rail does not distort as the welding's happening. So that's going to be the project for this morning. All right, I just thought I'd take a video of this part, and I did want to say that, this is kind of a tedious process as you flip these back and forth and reclamp them together and making sure everything's lined up. But, this is the frame for the car. You do want to make sure that everything is as square as possible. And the straighter you keep everything at this point, the better it's going to be for putting in motor mounts, putting in bracing, getting the rear end and the front end set up. So this part now, I just went ahead and I ground my spot welds flat here, so when I flip this over, it'll be nice and flat. This piece I already had ground yesterday. So I'm going to flip this back around. And now flip this one over on top. And for this part, you maybe could get away without lining everything back up. However, I just want to make sure that I'm keeping everything straight. So I'm going to go ahead and reset everything. I'm going to go down to the end and make sure that that is square and flush at the end. Checked a few places there, so I'm going to go ahead and put one clamp on. And everything there looks real good now, so I'll put a couple more clamps on this. All right, now I'm ready. I can go ahead and I'll do the welding across here, and then I'll be able to flip it back over, finish the welds on the other side, and finish all of these shorter welds across the 2-inch. All right, I got a little ahead of taking a video here, but what I did is I set the square to 1.5 inches, and I'm using 2x3 tubing. I wanted a little more bulk, a little more strength in the frame, so I went with 2x3 instead of 1.5 inches by 3, so should just be a little bit stronger. So I set this to 1.5 inches. I came in and made a mark here, and then I measured from the top of the frame rail down, and I made another mark coming across, and I've already pilot drilled a hole. And what I'm going to be doing next is using a 2 7/8 hole saw to open up a hole right here, and that's for a 3-inch tube. With the 2 7/8, that's going to give me a nice tight radius, and usually with these they move around a little bit anyway, and so that should give me the perfect hole that I need. I'll be cutting out the front part of this along here, and I'll show that when I get ready to